you didn't choose to see. The veil simply lifted one day, without warning, without permission. And suddenly the world looked different. Not better, not worse, just different. You began to notice the patterns, the scripts people follow without knowing, the masks they wear, believing them to be their faces, the collective dream they mistake for reality. And you wondered, have I gone mad? Or have I finally become sane? Jung knew this moment. He called it the beginning of individuation, the moment the soul separates from the mass, the moment you stop living the life that was written for you and begin to write your own. But here's what they don't tell you. Awakening is not a gift. It's a wound that never fully heals, because once you see, you cannot unsee. The comfortable illusions that cradle others through their days become transparent to you. You watch people chase shadows and call them substance. You see them build towers of meaning on foundations of sand. And you cannot warn them, because they are not asleep. They are dreaming, and the dreamer always resists awakening. This is the paradox of perception. Clarity brings isolation. You stand at the edge of the crowd, close enough to hear them, distant enough to see them. And in that space between belonging and exile, you begin to understand. Truth is not a destination. It's a frequency. And most people are not tuned to receive it, not because they're foolish, but because safety lives in numbers, and the tribe punishes those who see too much. There's a loneliness to this seeing, a specific kind of solitude that has no name. You sit in rooms full of people and feel the unbridgeable distance. They speak, and you understand the words, but beneath the words, you hear something else. The unconscious speaking through them, the collective programming running its ancient code. And you realize, I am in a different conversation than the one being spoken. Jung wrote that consciousness is a burden. He meant it literally. Every increase in awareness is an increase in weight. You carry knowledge others don't carry. You see connections others don't see. And there is no sharing this load, because the truth you've glimpsed cannot be taught. It can only be experienced. You could speak for hours and they would nod politely, then return to their dreams. Not from malice, but from necessity. The psyche protects itself. It must. Total awareness would be unbearable. So most people live in the shallows. They skim the surface of existence and call it depth. They mistake consensus for truth. They confuse comfort for wisdom. And you? You've descended into darker waters. You've met the parts of yourself the world told you to bury. You've shaken hands with your shadow. You've looked into the abyss Jung spoke of. And yes, it looked back. And in that mutual gaze, something changed. You became capable of a different kind of sight. But capability is not the same as comfort. To see clearly is to see the machinery, the invisible architecture that shapes every thought, every choice, every belief. You see how culture colonizes consciousness, how fear masquerades as reason, how the collective unconscious pulls strings we mistake for free will. And once you see the strings, you can never quite lose yourself in the puppet show again. There is a shadow that hangs over humanity. Not the shadow of any one person, but the accumulated darkness of the whole. Jung called it the collective shadow, the repository of all we refuse to acknowledge, all we deny, all we project onto others. And when you begin to see truth, you see this shadow clearly. You see it in the righteous anger that masks fear, in the virtue that conceals vice, in the public morality that hides private cruelty. You see how groups become less conscious than individuals, how crowds can commit atrocities no single person would dream of. Because in the collective, responsibility dissolves. The individual disappears into the we, and the we has no conscience, only momentum. This is why seers are dangerous to the tribe, not because they're wrong, but because they see what the tribe depends on denying. They see that the emperor has no clothes, that the sacred is often profane, that the heroes are sometimes villains. And this seeing threatens the very foundation of collective identity. So the tribe responds predictably: reject the seer, call them crazy, dangerous, too intense, too negative, too much. And perhaps they are too much, because they refuse to edit their vision to fit the acceptable frame. They refuse to dilute their truth to make it palatable. Jung himself was exiled from his own circles for seeing too clearly, for speaking too honestly. He knew the price of consciousness. He paid it in full. And so will you. Not because you want to be separate, but because truth creates separation. It draws a line between those who can bear to look and those who must look away. And once you're on the other side of that line, there is no going back. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unfeel what you've felt. You cannot return to innocence once experience has marked you. But here is where the journey deepens, where it stops being about others and becomes about you. Because the hardest truth you'll ever face is not out there in the world. It's in here, in the depths of your own psyche. Jung said that individuation requires a descent, a journey into the underworld of the self, a confrontation with everything you've rejected, suppressed, and denied. This is the real reason you see what others cannot. Not because you're special, but because you've gone where others fear to go. You've sat with your own darkness, your own contradictions, your own capacity for cruelty, cowardice, and self-deception. And instead of running, you stayed. You looked. You integrated. This is shadow work, not the comfortable kind that's become fashionable, but the real kind. The kind that shatters your self-image. The kind that reveals you're not who you thought you were. You are vaster and darker and stranger than the story you've been telling. And in that revelation, something extraordinary happens. You become whole, not perfect, not pure, but whole. You reclaim the exiled parts. You give voice to the silenced aspects. You make room for all of who you are. And when you do this, you develop a new kind of sight, because you can only see in others what you've acknowledged in yourself. The person who has never met their own shadow cannot recognize it in the world. They will project it everywhere, see enemies in mirrors, and never understand why they feel surrounded by darkness. But you've made the descent. You've walked through your own hell, and you've returned with something precious, the ability to see without judgment, to witness without condemning, to understand that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. This doesn't make the loneliness easier, but it makes it meaningful. And so you return, not to where you started, but to something new. You come back from the depths carrying light you didn't know existed. Not the bright, aggressive light of certainty, but the softer, steadier light of understanding. You realize that seeing truth is not about being right. It's about being awake. And awakeness is not a position to defend. It's a state to inhabit. You stop trying to convince others. You stop waiting for validation. You stop needing the world to confirm what you know. Because the truth you've found doesn't require consensus. It requires only your willingness to stand in it, alone if necessary. Misunderstood, if inevitable, Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he didn't say it would be comfortable. He didn't say you'd be celebrated. He said it was a privilege, meaning rare, difficult, worth everything. And you've paid the price. You've traded belonging for authenticity, comfort for consciousness, the safety of the known for the vastness of the real. Was it worth it? You don't ask this anymore, because you understand now, there was never a choice, not really. The soul has its own trajectory, and yours was always pointing toward truth, even when truth meant loneliness, even when truth meant exile. You see what others cannot see, because you've become what others cannot become. Fully yourself. Not the self the world wanted, but the self that was always there, waiting beneath the masks and the roles and the expectations. This is the final paradox. In becoming utterly yourself, you become universal, because the deepest personal is the most collective. Your individual truth connects to the eternal truth. Your private journey mirrors the hero's journey that has been walked 1,000 times before. You are alone, and you are never alone. You see what others cannot. And in that seeing, you become a bridge between conscious and unconscious, between individual and collective, between the darkness we fear and the darkness that contains all possibility. You realize now that your vision was never meant to separate you, but to connect you at a deeper level, not through agreement, but through presence. Through the quiet knowing that every soul, in its own time, must awaken, and that the same light you carry waits patiently in everyone, buried under their own dreams. So you stand at the edge. You watch. You witness. You hold space for a truth that has no audience. You learn to speak less and listen more, not to the noise of the world, but to the whisper of what's real beneath it. And in that quiet, radical act of presence, you are enough. You always were. Because the journey was never about becoming something more. It was about remembering what you already are. A fragment of consciousness exploring itself. A spark of eternity peering through human eyes. A soul, awake in the dream of the world. And as you breathe, as you stand in the stillness of knowing, you feel it, the gentle pulse of life moving through everything. You realize that truth was never hidden. It was only waiting for someone brave enough to see. Someone like you.